It really took us 12 hours to get from the CEDH Rules Committee to the owner of Top Deck follows Nazis on Twitter. Ooh, there's a lot to break down here. It's been absolutely insane in terms of the controversy around the angry little brother of our favorite format, EDH. Now, CEDH has had its big rise and I guess a lot of problems with it over the past couple of years, notably this year. Actually, a lot of statements, especially from the EDH Rules Committee around it, that's kind of started this drama. And I think really what we need to understand here is, from my understanding as someone who's casually tried to get into the format and has a very outside awareness of it, is that CEDH should and is not its own format. It really is a subsect of EDH with the ultimate form of Rule Zero in mind, where everyone has an understanding that it is just about to win. It's not about doing the crazy combo, doing things just because you can. It's really about, again, winning and hyper optimizing. And to many people, that can feel like the antithesis of what EDH really is, how it removes the aspect of the gathering, and it's more so, I mean, in a way about the magic, but also not so much, because it's not about the big combos. It's about the crazy things going on and how many people are playing Rogsai at your local tables, you know, all that good stuff. But EDH and CEDH are still much and so the same format, right? It is just the top end of what is EDH. And so with a recent tweet from the kind of rules committee themselves, I think this sparked this whole quote unquote rebellion. And I want to kind of walk through it for all of you here, just to give you a quick kind of catch up and see where y'all stand, because I think it's getting a little ridiculous. I think the EDH community, I think largely they're a fine group of individuals, right? Like, we may harp on them for not playing interaction and just being silly folks that can't have Rule Zero conversations, but largely the format is fine and it's been helping Magic grow, so we can say that. But for CEDH, I think there's a lot of like mismanagement and discourse, just because like there's the degenerates in there, because you get like the worst type of competitive players that also join it, but also some of the best and most vocal content creators and everything that promote the format. So there's a lot of good, but then there's also a lot of bad. So let's break it down from the tweet first. So firstly, Jim here talks about, sometimes people see some ambiguity in my position because of the connection to CEDH and my role on the rules committee. Spelling this out so it's not unclear, there's zero desire in the rules committee to manage the format in a way that balances or curates the CEDH or tournament metas. So very clearly, you know, they're not banning cards because of CEDH. There's very little desire for that. They threw them on bone once, I believe it was with Flash, and that's about it. That is the farthest they'll go. There's a lot of kind of, and I think that was because of the big uptick in management and clear scope of what the RC is doing. And that's where that kind of came from. I spent a lot of my time making things less hostile towards CEDH players within the format, because I think there's a home for us here. On that front, there's also a lot more to do, but the end state I'm pushing for is not for CEDH to be managed as a competitive format. If people want that kind of curated competitive format, it might be possible, and it could probably be very successful, but it needs to come from within the CEDH community. Now, there's a lot here. It's essentially saying, we don't want to ban things for CEDH. I think it could be a good format, but y'all need to handle it yourself. Like, that's it, right? Y'all need to handle it yourself, because at the end of the day, again, CEDH is a subsect of EDH. It is still the same format, and it should not be managed separately. I think a lot of people get like too in the weeds about it. They get too involved in it. It's like if we played it's like if we played Modern and then like made like a special curated Modern, which I guess has technically already happened, but like I think those nostalgia boomers and like, you know, member berry players, I don't think we need to be making a separate format. Just deal with it, okay? Like, it's okay. And I think like in terms of responses here, Rebels I think outlines it pretty well for me. Oh, I'm sure the replies to this one are going to be super normal today. Look, I'm going to link the tweet down below. This one was from a while ago. It was August 21st. And they really are like, you know what, for largely, they're like not bad. I think a lot of content creators and a lot of big personalities kind of came in and responded here. But there are some random one-offs of like some really random people. So ultimately what ended up happening here is a CEDH Rules Committee Twitter ended up coming about, right? So this is where the problem really starts. So right now, got a bunch of followers, you know, people kind of going in, and I don't think like the followers really mean much. Like it's really just kind of people just trying to stay on the nose about this type of stuff, right? On the pulse, I should say. So I'm not gonna kind of harp on anybody kind of following this, but largely speaking, what they came with was their mission statement here. And so they're like, okay, formally announcing the CEDH Rules Committee, or CEDH RC for short. We know you have some questions, so let's go through them. So first of all, this is not any WotC backed anything, right? Like it's not like the Rules Committee that has ties to Wizards of the Coast but isn't directly managed by them, right? Like there's ties, there's people that have correlations and connections to Wizards of the Coast, but Wizards of the Coast doesn't have a direct desire to manage EDH like that with the Rules Committee. But the Rules Committee, with their ties, creates a soft ban list, and with that in mind, they know that they don't want to impose like totalitarian power on top of the format. They want to keep it open. They want to keep the gathering the primary focus of this. So now the CEDH Rules Committee comes in. So they're gonna post the who, why, how, when. I mean, why not who, what, where? Okay, whatever. I don't know. Why? In short, we believe the community-driven management of the format will keep CEDH tournament metagame fresh and exciting. The EDH RC has said this should come up within the this EDH RC has said this should come from within the community. We like to try. We read our philosophy here, so I'm not going to go into this. I'll link this philosophy here, but I think largely speaking, like these tweets summarize it like well enough. We can kind of ignore that part of it. So the who, Mikey Holohan, Top Deck founder and head TO. Okay, so first one, Evan Pierce, longtime CEDH grinder. Okay, Matthew of Lamora's Cards, tournament CEDH creator. Data Tog, the CEDH data analysis expert. Michael Baldy Aerosmith, L3 judge, CEDH judging expert. Okay, so you have like a head TO, a grinder, a content creator, a data aggregate, and a judge. Okay, so you kind of have like a group in terms of roles. Okay, but I think we already see that there's a bit of a problem in random diversity. It just seems like a collection of dudes that just kind of know each other. So who? Part 2, we are not affiliated with any tournament organizer. That doesn't make any sense because you have a head TO right here. You are officially affiliated. Mikey's a head TO. What does this statement mean? Or any other group. We are fully independent entity who would like 2 more members, but don't have more info at this time. We'd read more about this here. Okay, so they want to add 2 members. Okay, it's just a bunch of dudes so far. How? Via a new ban list, silly. However, no alternate ban list has been agreed upon yet. Throughout the process, we'll work on this. These are 10 principles. So I feel like this is just becoming like a separate format, right? Like they want to create their own ban list, but like within CEDH. So it's like you have a 9 power level deck, which is EDH. The minute you get to 10, is that CEDH and you have to follow this new ban list? Or is this like just for tournaments? Like, I mean, the CEDH tournaments right now are using the EDH ban list, right? So how does this catch on? Like, we're going to have a bunch of tournaments that don't have this, some that do. Who's following this, right? Like, how does this, I guess this is part of that grassroots movement effort. I mean, got to give them points for like kind of trying and creating a base for it. So when we are aligning the initiative with the upcoming Top Deck season, so this is topdeck.gg to those of you that know the site, within the draft of the proposed ban and community feedback from launching this month and a final decision by late November. Whole schedule is here. Thanks for reading. Hope to get an update. Okay. All right. So first and foremost, Trinket Mage. Very simple tweet. Interested to see where this ends up. Problem is, at normal commander events, won't CEDH players just use a regular ban list? Seems weird if the command fest there have 2 formats being played, right? Like that's the best part. Trinket Mage just really just going off. You got a like for this one. Trinket Mage just really stating the obvious. Isn't this just 2 formats? Who follows this? What's your backing? Where do you have to stand? And I get like, they kind of created it to try, right? So I'll give them that. But like, where is this really coming from? This should be like a community-led effort, not just like, oh, you know what? They asked it to, here it is. You should gain some interest, pool different members of the community, and the CEDH community and everything. And I think Bobby Christine talks about it, like where, there's no where. So they're like, where are the women? So specifically here, kind of addressing the lack of diversity. It seems like a bunch of dudes that like really knew each other and isn't really on the pulse of the rest of the community. There is actually a pretty on the pulse content creator and group of folks that play CEDH, help kind of maybe not curate the format, but speak to the format, make content around it. And it seems like only one of them was really consulted, like one of them was a content creator, but not many of what I think a lot of people would consider the front-facing members of the CEDH kind of content sphere seem to be involved here. And especially from a diversity perspective, a lack of women, which I think, you know, Mara Rose, that's my favorite. This is my favorite troll account, by the way. They go to a different school and are from Canada. Yo, they go from a different school is hilarious. That gotta love high school politics on Twitter, right? So Robin here. Rob O deleted his tweet, implied that there aren't women qualified for the role. So from what I understand, Rob, I believe, is the owner of topdeck.gg. So they're using this platform, topdeck.gg, to manage their stuff. I believe Rob is the owner of this, implying that women aren't qualified, which I think is kind of random because like there are a fair amount of like female CEDH players from what I see on Twitter, at least. It definitely is a male dominated space based on like, you know, the content that I watch and everything, but like I doesn't mean that women aren't playing. And if the whole idea is like inclusivity, right? Like you want to create an environment where people can come in and play, then I think you want like a diverse cast on your RC, I imagine, right? And I mean, they're saying here, caving to non-merit standard is not something I can willingly back. I mean, that's fair, right? Like I think a lot of people have problems with like diversity hires and everything. And like, I mean, the idea, we all meme about it and everything, you know, the personality hire and the diversity hire at your workplace can sometimes be a little obvious based on their lack of experience. But the whole idea is that you would purposefully hire folks that are diverse, but also have the experience, which I think is a problem here, where there are folks that have CEDH experience that could provide a different perspective on access. And that is why you have the diversity hire, because a lot of organizations at large lack diversity, whether it be from a female presence, whether it be from a cultural perspective. You have diversity hires to force that onto companies so that they hire talent that is diverse and not just you know, kind of like, just gotta say it, not just white talent or not just a single race talent. And so that is why we have diversity hires. It's not necessarily about being, you're not going after women because it's non-merit based. You go after the women and the people of color that do have experience, because there are people in the community that do have this experience. So let's just get that out of the way here, right? Like, I understand, well, I'm not promoting non-merit based kind of bringing on, but there are plenty of folks of color that are you know are not women, whatever, that have merit, that have experience in CEDH that can join on. It's just you don't necessarily see them a lot of the time in content, but you do see them. You do see them on Twitter, especially. I don't know, maybe your feed isn't giving them to you. They exist. And so that is where this problem kind of comes on. I mean, especially, you know, topdeck.gg, this is the website for it. Rob seems like, you know, the account doesn't exist anymore. So I guess based on like pressure, they kind of removed it. But I mean, that's kind of where like the issue is here. I don't think CEDH needs its own quote unquote rules committee. Yes, there maybe can be a grassroots effort from like a group of folks coming in, but someone just kind of popping in and be like, this is what it is, isn't really the way to do this, right? Like, you need polling, you need community sentiment, you need a movement to make something like this work. You can't just hop on with a group of your buddies and say, yo, we're trying it, right? Like it's just a lot more complicated than that. You can do it, but then you can see some glaring issues from the community here as to how you're getting the initial group together, looking for 2 more members, and then talking about how non-merit based versus merit based, whatever, no women versus some women, whatever it might be. There's a lot of problems to this, and I think this situation is probably going to evolve. There's going to be a lot more on the pulse with this, so I think I highly encourage y'all to follow it and gauge your own opinion on this. Again, this is coming from someone who is outside, or I should say on the periphery of CEDH as I look to slowly kind of get into it, very much doing so with like proxies and everything. But the format seems like pretty fun every so often. As a semi-regular EDH player, I see the merit in it. I see the merit in low power, I see the merit in mid power, and I see the merit in high power gameplay. All of them have their own draw to them, and they force like different styles of gameplay, different types of EDH politics and everything, and that type like still exists kind of in a soft level in CEDH as well, right? Like there is an understanding of like winning and everything, but there are certain types of politicking that exist in CEDH because it is just EDH with a certain rule zero blanket in mind. There still is conversation allowed to be had and all that stuff. A lot of people treat it like just a game of like competitive Magic, but even in a game of competitive 1v1 Magic, there are like conversations that happen back and forth, maybe not that kind of address what's happening in the board state, right? Like I'm not going to be like, okay, I'll let you resolve your Murktide as long as you don't counter my next spell. Like that's not what's happening in competitive 1v1. But there is an aspect of the gathering kind of promoting the game and just being in the game itself. You know, CEDH isn't just for people just silently 7-card hand, do this, if they do this, I do this, blah, blah, and no talking whatsoever. There still is a conversation. There still is a gathering. There still is a social aspect to it. And that is what the EDH Rules Committee, not the CEDH RC, seems to want to do here. And it seems to be like this is some like random way to also like manipulate card prices as well. Like who's going to help you determine the ban list, right? Like you already created this kind of group of folks that don't seem to have like any which way about them. It seems to be just a bunch of guys that like just know each other. So how are you going to determine the ban list now, right? Like you're going to get these 2 more folks involved. Maybe you get them from the community, but how is that polling going to work? Like, what is your kind of mission statement? Where do you start? Like, what is the channel behind this and all that stuff? Again, I think this is all going to be evolving. It's like, I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. I think maybe CEDH needs some soft direction. I think that would help, but largely like it's not really the most necessary thing in the world. I think the CEDH community largely is able to manage themselves in many ways, especially what I see from the content perspective. There's a lot of variety in it if you want it to be. So I don't really understand what the point of any of this is, honestly.